Hey guys, welcome back to Abnormality. Big Tony.
Can't.
So tonight's episode, we kind of thought it would be a good idea to maybe, we've kind of delved into some of the history of Salem. We've gone on a couple of hunts, areas around town that we've checked out. And we thought maybe it would be a good idea to kind of step back a little bit, maybe talk a little bit about the history of ghost hunting and maybe some of the stories. So you're gonna share some information with us about history of ghost hunting as it pertains to how all of this started and how we've kind of progressed to where we are these days.
Right.
And then I'm going to give a little bit of information of specifically some of the areas in and around Salem that are kind of notorious for paranormal activity.
Okay.
So, and we've got our handy dandy notes here, and we're just going to kind of wing it and go.
Sounds like a good plan.
All right. History of ghost hunting. What do you got for me?
So the history of ghost hunting, I mean, we all know now, you got your media, you got TV, you got movies, you got it all. But the question that everybody has is, how long has this been going on? Well, some of the facts that we've actually dug up was the first ghost hunt was actually in 100 AD in Rome, actually. So it was by a kid named Pliny. He was a lawyer, author, and magistrate in Rome. He was relatively new to it, so it was a new thing. People didn't really know how to handle it. I mean, back then I couldn't imagine, oh, I'm a ghost hunter.
Well, yeah, I mean, they weren't exposed to all, kind of those things that we see that kind of dull our senses down.
Yeah.
So it's probably pretty fascinating and a new experience.
So the oldest recognized paranormal group was the Ghost Club in London in 1862.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's where they have probably the most documentation of it being an actual organization type thing that we see nowadays. In the mid-1880s, the American Psychological Association suggested applying a scientific method to ghost hunting. I don't know why they'd come up with a science for it, but...
Yeah. Well, it's because we have to prove everything scientifically. We can't just accept that it is.
Yeah. The Society of the Psycho Research, whose mission was to study the existence of ghosts and spirits.
Okay.
So in London, if you guys have seen movies, you know that there's a branch of paranormal researcher called the Telemasca. They're a lot like our paranormal organizations here.
Okay.
It's on a couple of movies. They study the paranormal world, but they don't really broadcast it to the masses. They kind of keep it. It's like our FBI here.
Kind of like a record keeping.
Yeah.
They do it. They keep a record of it.
Right.
They don't talk about it a lot.
Yeah, they document it and then they kind of archive it because they feel that if the general public has an idea of what goes on outside of our normal brain capacity, people freak out, they panic, and
It's like Men in Black stuff right there.
it is
Men in
Bigfoot.
Black. All the things that happen. Bigfoot. I shaved down. I'm here. I learned how to talk. That's why you don't see any recent videos of me.
Right.
I'm in studio. I'm busy.
So one of the first ghost hunters was a man by the name of Joseph Glanville. He was the chaplain to King Charles II in the 1600s.
Wow.
So
Long time ago.
It's been dated back a while, realistically. I mean, but like I said, in 1862 was the first organization of an actual, we are a ghost crew. London, especially, being very old.
Well, yeah, it's an old part of the world.
It is, but Joseph Glanville's most famous case was the drummer of Tedworth, which was apparently an early poltergeist case.
Was it the drum that was the poltergeist?
I don't know.
Wow.
But how did they know to classify it as a poltergeist?
Well, maybe in research they just needed to have a name for it, and so they gave it that. They read the facts.
Well, I mean,
Didn't know what to
poltergeist
call it.
I think that's Latin.
Is it?
I think so.
Yeah.
We'd have to look that up.
It's Latin for polter of the Geist.
Maybe. I don't
be.
know.
We'll have to Google it.
So some of the things we're going to cover real quick about ghost hunting in general is it's the process of investigating locations that are supposedly haunted using techniques and methods that you've learned over the years or you've adapted and kind of just follow along with on your own. We use several electronic devices which can be flawed. Some equipment out there is that you actually have to program yourself, which I don't like using those because you, like an Ovilus, you have to plug it into your computer and load the dictionary into it, which to me, that seems like I could manipulate it however I want to.
Sure.
We use handheld and static night vision cameras, infrared, thermal cameras. We use it all. You can't. I mean, there's nothing that realistically you can't use on a ghost hunt.
Yeah. Well, and I think that another part of the, as far as the history of it, is if you look back and if you've ever written any ancient stories, like old stories that were written back in the early days of this country and beyond, there's always that, even Shakespeare, he wrote about the ghost, and there's always those references to ghosts. So it's a terminology that's been around for a long time. So I mean, the terminology started many years ago, and people's fascination and curiosity. And I think it was, in the early times, it was more of a story to be told instead of a factual event. But people would read that, because we talk about, like the hanging grounds, that I've got some information on here as well. But you talk about that being the form of entertainment in theaters. And so people would read books because that was kind of like their entertainment. And you hear about ghosts. And it just wants people to put something with that makes sense, and they want to check it out. So it only kind of makes sense that natural progression happened over time. And one of the things that we haven't really discussed or talked about on there, and I know that religion is not our thing. It's not something we talk about, but even if you've ever read the Bible, which I've done many, many times, it even talks about, like the ghosts of people, and the disciples saw Jesus walk across the water and they thought he was a ghost. I mean, so that terminology, even though the Bible's been translated so many times, there's always been that fascination with the paranormal and the ghost and the,
right.
And I think the one that I think about is in Shakespeare that I was talking about is Alas, Poor Yorick. I knew him well. He's got the skeleton thing. He's talking about the ghost.
Yeah.
So, there's references made to that, and it creates that fascination and starts, giving people an idea of something.
Right.
Which progresses, through time to London, which is a very old part of the world, many moons ago. So a lot of history and things, and created that fascination that's developed into what we have these days.
Yeah, and it's this. If you take it back and you look back to Rome or London or whatever to see where we are at now, the evolution of whether you're a ghost hunter or a paranormal investigator, whatever you want to title yourself.
Yeah.
The evolution is just amazing.
Yeah.
Because without the technology that we have now, you'd be right back where they were.
Well, and now they wear eye makeup and shirts that are too small.
Dude, we won't talk about that, okay?
Okay, well.
Not until I get you in eye makeup, and then we'll talk about it.
That's going to be like 5 seasons and national contracts from now.
All right.
Going to happen.
Fair enough for me. So some of the differences between ghost hunters and paranormal investigators. Ghost hunting has long been criticized because it's the absence of a scientific method where you're hunting something.
Yeah.
Well, if you're hunting something, which is another reason why most paranormal groups don't charge, is because you can't guarantee a result.
Yeah.
I can't.
Well, and you say ghost hunting too, you think of like Ghostbusters, where they slide the trap out and trap it.
Proton packs?
Yeah, I never would want to catch something.
No.
But
ghost hunting is considered a pseudoscience.
There's that word again, see?
By a majority of educators, academics, science writers, and skeptics, just to kind of group everybody in. Again, without the proof that ghosts exist, you can't tell me it's a science. Because a science proves, or a science, you have to have results.
Yeah, it's just that need to put fact to something, to prove it scientifically. Instead of it's just people have a feeling, have gut feelings about things, see things, hear things they can't explain.
Right. Some of the things that amaze me about this industry, and I hate that word.
The industry.
The industry that is
Sounds
ghost
like
hunting.
a boy band.
Yeah.
The industry.
Is the fact that a lot of your corporate markets out there realize how popular it is, and they've skyrocketed the price on everything.
Yeah.
Because everybody and their dog wants to go out and be a ghost hunter.
Well, and we talked about that because, there was that push to want to go over and do the penitentiary over in Montana. And it was like thousands of dollars that they want to do, because it's become so mainstream and so popular.
Well, and it also, I understand for charging the money because it protects, if there is vandalism.
Sure.
I get that.
Fatty deposit or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of the methods that we use in this world of paranormal investigating, we do digital photography, still photography, full spectrum photography, which allows the camera to see beyond the capacity of our normal human eyes. We use digital thermometers that you can kind of tell if there's a cold spot, whatever.
Yeah.
DVRs that see in night vision. Believe it or not, compasses will tell you if there's a ghost.
Yeah, that whole idea of the magnetic field will be affected.
Right, and
it'll
so
just start spinning.
You point it north and it's spinning on you, then there's a good chance there's a magnetic field.
Of some kind.
Right. Whether it's, you're standing over a ley line of the earth or whatever. I don't think a spirit's going to sit there and go,
Okay. Yeah.
But, and also what's popular and now even more prevalent is psychics, mediums,
Yeah.
clairvoyants. They're coming out of the woodwork saying that they can
William
talk to
Becker?
ghosts. Love you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just psychics, mediums, paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, whatever. We all go hand in hand.
Well, I think it's all become kind of an umbrella type terminology of different things that people do and different ways they go about it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and some of the equipment we use is battery operated, which is it's not so much the piece of equipment that we're relying on, it's more the battery.
well, yeah, and that causes problems. I mean, we had an investigation just a couple months ago where, we had all this footage on the camera. The camera started wigging out when we were having these weird things go on down in that basement, in that back room, and we ended up losing half the files.
Yeah.
It's just part of the
And
part of the game.
makes me wonder if there was something on those footages that
Oh, there was something on those footages because it was myself, William, and our camera guy Justin, and there was something there.
that just didn't want us
It was
to.
ice cold. The camera light, we had a low light on he was using to film us, and it was flickering and acting weird. He stepped back because he felt like something was going on, and he said, "Did you guys see that? The camera just did something really weird." And then you go back later and look at it, and we lost most of that footage.
Yeah. So I mean, as for the history, it's been there a while. It didn't start 12 years ago when TV got a hold of it. They just found a market to tap
And based
into.
on your belief, Christianity or where your belief system lies. I mean, there's been references to it, since the beginning of what we consider civilization.
Exactly. I mean, like you were saying earlier, just a little bit ago, Jesus walked on water.
Yeah.
Jesus rose from the dead. Well, if you rise from the dead, you're a ghost.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
It all started. Cavemen were in there, look like little Pac-Man ghosts on the wall with their hammer and chisel.
I mean, that's a whole other story to talk
That's a
about
whole
later.
nother
They saw some stuff back then that makes me wonder what was really going on back then.
Yeah.
'Cause some of the stuff, the drawings they did,
Yeah.
they were seeing some things that they probably shouldn't have.
Crazy stuff. So as we talk about the history in kind of a global aspect, now we kind of localize it. I went into Salem Public Library, their homepage, and I found some really good information that talks about specifically Salem in general. And one of the things that they noted is its namesake, which is Massachusetts, Salem, Massachusetts, is a much older society. So we don't have quite the deep history that they do over there, but we're kind of like the sister city, as you had said earlier on another episode. But they've had a lot more dramatic events. We've had kind of on a smaller scale things that have happened, but one of the earliest recorded information they have is actually the Native Americans that lived in the area, because we do have a pretty decent population of Native Americans that are, in this area. All you have to do is find a casino. They're here somewhere, right? But here in the valley, before the white man came, the natives believe that the Kalapuya Goblin was a fearsome iron-hide entity who roamed the mountains and prairies of western Oregon, skulking about to grab and devour unsuspecting wanderers. So that was documented in the tribe, the Kalapuya tribe, that was kind of a thing that did, was it a bedtime story to scare, but it was kind of like their belief system.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And it even, it talks about the name of this creature was the Choochahoneyhoof. And they say that name might have been kind of come about to describe it because they wanted to tell their kids the story to kind of incite fear into them and, get them to, pay attention and do what they're supposed to do.
And stay at home.
And if you don't behave, Chunihoneyhoofu will get you, and so kids kind of got scared. And then later on, once the white men moved into the area, the pioneers kind of settled the area and came, you hear the pioneers all the time. We got the big one right up on top of the Capitol. There was a site in South Salem that had a long reputation for haunting. Even before it was investigated officially in 1878, there was an old house that was known to be occupied by a ghostly presence, including a great yellow dog, Long vacant of earthly inhabitants and kept locked up, the house gave evidence to 3 investigating parties of paranormal manifestations. There was the sound of feet tramping around that they would hear all the time. Now, this house was shut up,
Right.
but I mean, people would go in there and they would hear it. You know, there's feet running around. There was a shadowy figure that would roam around the place and then fade away that people would see. And then the sudden apparition of this yellow dog that was on the property in the house. So, and it says here, whether it's the same house as the Rosedale area on Bates Road south of Cole, which today is reported to be haunted, cannot be ascertained. So basically the records weren't kept good enough, so they don't know exactly where that is, but it's just documented that there was a house out South Salem.
And that house isn't there anymore.
The house is gone?
Yeah, it fell victim to the elements.
Yeah. Well, imagine if they built something on top of it, you know, like a coffee shop or something, and they're having a coffee and you can hang out with the ghosts. Be like Harry Potter, hanging out with the spirits.
There you go.
Nearly headless Nick. Yeah, that's right. And then hanging grounds. The next one they talk about as far as the hanging grounds, which we have an episode on that we're going to talk about more in the future, where there was 4 hangings, it looks like here. I thought there was 5.
There may have been 5, but it looks like, I mean, the 5th one may have occurred after the penitentiary took over.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we had back in the 1850s, 1865, the 2 gentlemen that we're going to talk about later when we go over to the hunting grounds or the hanging grounds. Let's see what else we got here. Oregon State Prison, another big one. I mean, the Oregon State Prison
Is old.
The area was paved, talking like late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah.
So it's got a long history. And a former guard that worked at the penitentiary who began work there in 1956 was told at the time of his employment that number 4 tower had a history of strange phenomena. While on solitary duty during the graveyard shift, a guard never felt quite alone. There was always the feeling of another presence there with him, and the name of that shift duty should give a clue to the origin of that feeling. For the tower is built over the former prison graveyard. So they buried everybody and then they just built over top of it. Abandoned in 1917, the area was paved over for a recreation yard in 1923, and later was the site of the vocation building. Creepy. So then, what do you think is, if you had to pick the 2 top most famous haunted places in Salem, what do you think they'd be?
Most famous or
As
most
far as
haunted?
most haunted.
Fairview Training Center.
Fairview is the next one on my list.
Yeah.
The specter of an old woman has been seen to patrol the grounds at Fairview. So reports a former employee at the home. Late at night, the ghost has been observed around one of the cottages at the school, which opened in 1913 to care for the state's mentally retarded children and adults. A cemetery for the institution held Holderness Cottage was in use for 5 years there before being abandoned. Nobody in authority seems to know what happened to the 24 bodies that were buried there, whether they were exhumed and reburied
Yeah.
elsewhere, or they were simply left in the old cemetery and they built over. Former employee at Fairview who worked the graveyard shift at Holderness Cottage was witness to one of the restless spirits that roamed the grounds. While working in the basement lounge of the cottage, he saw on 3 separate occasions a 30-ish man passing through the kitchen and lounge area whose description matched none of the staff that were on duty, nor did the entity use a key to open the locked door of the facility. Although the specter seemed unaware of his presence and was in no way threatening, the young man made it a practice from then on to avoid working in that particular area, which is what we've talked about, kind of that residual thing. You know, some of my experiences, one of the jobs that I talked about earlier was, it was just somebody kind of on a routine that he would see and walking around the building. And there's a list of it. You know, I encourage viewers, if you want to learn more about this, like I said, Salem Public Library online is where we got all this information. And there's more.
Don't go to Fairview.
Another whole page of stories. Well, nothing's left either. I mean,
No, there's still one. There's still one building left.
I thought they took that last building down. Is it still there?
LeBreton's gone, but there's one more building tucked in the back that I saw the other day.
Really?
I was driving by it, and you can see the roof of it, so it's still there. But
Okay. Well, and then the next one that on my list is right across the street from there, and that's Hillcrest Juvenile Correction Facility.
yeah, actually, I've talked to a couple of people that used to work there in records, and it's pretty messed up in there.
Well, and you know it's going bye-bye pretty soon.
Yeah.
They've talked about selling it.
It's already
tearing it
sold.
down. And they're gonna vacate it next year sometime.
Supposedly building houses or something up there.
We need to get out there before they tear it down. But it talks on here as another restless spirit at Hillcrest hanging. It was hanging out at the school building, is believed to be that of Robert S. Farrell, for whom the high school is named. While serving as Secretary of State, he was killed in the crash of a light plane in late October of 1947, along with Governor Earl Snell, Senate President Marshall Cornett, and pilot Cliff Hogue. Farrell may return periodically to his namesake school to oversee its operations. That would be great. And then, of course, the most famous, what's last?
Oregon State Hospital.
Oregon State Hospital, which I would love to go hang out and spend the night down there.
Yeah, but they're anti-paranormal groups.
They really are. You know, there's a huge history. I mean, we can go into, you know, pages and pages of, you know, reported cold spots, screaming, doors closing on their own, footsteps running around, you know, through cold spots in the halls, shadows that go around the corners and disappear into where there's no doors. Just a huge history of paranormal activity and freaky things that are going on. Here's next on my list is the Chemeketa Court Historic District house haunting, the old Bush House on Mission Street. There's like a long list. Candles lighting by themselves at night, windows opening and closing on their own, poltergeist activities where objects move around of their own volition, nightmares afflicting the young people living there.
I've actually, well, nobody lives there now.
Well, this is obviously in history.
But I actually, when we were doing the walking tours, like I was speaking about on the Hanging Grounds episode, one of the stops was the Bush House, and I've actually seen.
I wonder if they'd let us do it.
No,
off limits.
Well, it's not that. It's there's been a couple of other groups in the past that have gone in there and done that, and they broke some artifacts that you cannot replace.
Oh yeah, there's stuff there that's just invaluable.
So you know they shut it down basically.
It even mentions on here with the Chemeketa Court Historic District, another home nearby, an angry male spirit in the hallway and back bedroom who stubbornly refuses to leave. A child crying can be heard when there's no children around. And then that familiar cold spot that persisted for 3 years before the energies were encouraged to leave. 3 years.
So think about what Jay was saying on that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Why would you leave? Maybe he's trying to tell you that that's why you won't leave, is because his body's in the
He
wall.
finally just got so tired of you not listening, he's like, deuces, I'm out.
Right. Or maybe he's trying to tell you that his body's buried in there somewhere, you know?
Yeah. All right, next, Madrona area haunting. You know anything about that?
That's over by Fairview. I believe it's an Indian chief.
Like spirits still in residence there. It was a house in the Madrona area built in the 1930s. Multitude of owners and disasters. Burned twice. It has been rebuilt twice. 7 restless spirits have been identified in the house, all Native American. For the house was built over a burial ground. You think they'd check that out a little bit before they started building?
See, that's the thing is, like, you know...
Was it just that lack of respect thing of not respecting the history of it, or...?
Well, I mean, kind of. You know,
Okay.
I mean, because you got to think back in the pioneer days, pioneers buried their dead wherever they could.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
they didn't, you know, if you took the time to sonar every bit of ground that you were going to dig,
Yeah.
no houses would ever get dug, because once you find a body, it's got to remain vacant for like a year before you can even, you know.
This is actually the end of the story here. The Native American was the house was built over burial ground that contained the bodies of groups of women raped and killed by early lawless settlers. One of the entities still attached to the house, a warrior, guards the house and refuses to leave. The present owners have long tried to convince him to move on.
He's a Native American spirit. He does what he wants. And
Yeah.
I don't say that to be, you know,
Like joking.
like
I mean,
joking. The Native American spirits do what they want. They are on, you know, like we were talking, you got your religious beliefs or whatever. They believe in Mother Earth. I mean, that's their nature.
Yeah.
So he's protecting his belief.
Yeah.
And plus he's protecting the graves of his women that were
Yeah. Murdered. Wow. All right, next one. Actually, this one rings for me. I've been in there. The Elsinore Theater.
Yeah.
They've got, you know, like the legendary cold spot that's on stage that's apparently to this day that when you walk through it, that cold spot stays in the one spot, no matter when you walk there. Sightings of people up in the scaffolding, a man's figure walking into the theater, which was me. I used to watch movies there. Back in the old days, it was the Capitol Theater on this side. Elsinore was around the corner, and you could see there was like a shadow of a person walking around. Dust drifting down from a lighting grid when there's nothing there to disturb it. Intense feelings of someone beside you when no one's there. Reports of actors, directors, stagehands, managers, and other theater personnel from over the year. These are all the reports that they talked about. And it's just a little information. Elsinore was built in 1926. Last on my list is Pioneer Cemetery haunting. Know much about this?
I do.
You do?
We've investigated it.
Have you?
A couple times.
Talks about graveyards have long possessed a reputation for being scary places to be after dark. In the spring of 2002, a group of paranormal investigators, could have been you. Oh, okay, somebody else. Paranormal investigators visited Pioneer Cemetery at night. Greeted upon entering by an angry spirit perched in a tree, the group was warned to leave as they were unwelcome on the premises. Once the spirit was calmed, they proceeded through the cemetery. Unexplained noises came from the graves, including a clanging sound inside one of the crypts. Footsteps recorded on the audio equipment when no one was at the end of the burial ground, and a baby crying. So what was your experience of Pioneer?
So my experience was actually very peaceful. Cemeteries are a difficult thing. I mean, to investigate realistically, if you think about it, they're full of the dead.
Yeah.
You're bound to witness something in there. But as for the spirit in the tree, we were there 2 nights in a row, twice. Never once saw him. So maybe it was the group was doing something wrong. Maybe they weren't actually there with permission, that he was like a guardian saying, you don't have permission to be here, whatever.
Yeah.
But we got some pretty good evidence out of there. The part that makes me mad the most, and we've talked about this on other episodes, is, you know, we can't do Pioneer Cemetery because of vandals.
People messing things up for us.
I mean, we go in there now, even during the day, you look at the crypts, the windows are shattered, the bars are cut out. It's like,
yeah.
Why?
Taking a piece of history home.
Yeah,
thinking
well,
it's cool.
you take a piece of history, especially from a crypt, something's going to follow you home.
And you've got the Craigslist guy with the ghost in the trunk.
You do have that guy. We need to look that up and see if he's still got it for sale.
If he's still for sale, that might be a sign that we need to do it. So I think this is amazing. I mean, we talked a little bit about the history of ghost hunting in general, and just the fascinating stuff that's just right here in our little town of Salem. That it's not written on a log when you drive in. Oh, we have a huge, history of paranormal activity in this town. Come check us out.
Yeah, you got almost 2,000 years of reported investigations. I mean, that's amazing to me.
Yeah. So it goes back to the beginning of time, and who knows what the future holds, and when more and more things come to light. I mean, we didn't even talk about places, like Psychos, and that didn't even make the list, and that's one of our favorite places as far as a lot of activity.
Here's my question for you.
What's that?
What were they using for techniques back then?
Probably just what they heard and what they thought
Stones,
they saw.
maybe?
Yeah, possible.
Because, like moonstones and agates, you can supposedly do investigations with those. So
maybe that's where the
dowsing rod came from.
Dowsing rod came from, was they just kind of walked around and waited for it to point at stuff.
Clear.
Ghost is here.
No, when I was reading that, I was actually wondering, like, what techniques did they use? Because you didn't have the ability to record. I mean, you going to record in stone?
Yeah. Well, it's like, I think it would probably depend on what kind of person you are. Were you a religious leader? Were you somebody who was attached to the church, trying to find something out? Were you just somebody who was curious and was hearing noises? I think it just kind of depends.
That really depends, but, thinking back that far, I mean, look at what we, just in the 11 years we've been doing it, how much technology has advanced itself. I can't imagine being back then trying to do an investigation.
Or where we're going to be in 15 years.
Maybe they were using a Ouija board.
No, I don't do Ouija boards.
I said maybe they were.
Well, they might have. Might be where it came from.
Maybe.
All right, so I'm Big Tony.
I'm Kent.
Thank you guys for watching this episode of Abnormality. We'll catch you guys next time.